Major Danny Sjursen drops by to talk about Donald Trump and war. Check it out. I think you'll find it fascinating. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. On the line with us is Major Danny Sjursen. He's a U.S. Army strategist, former history instructor at West Point, who served tours with reconnaissance units in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's the author of Ghost Riders of Baghdad, Soldiers, Civilians, and the Myth of the Surge, his memoir and critical analysis of the Iraq War. His website is fortressonahill.com, and you can tweet him at Skeptical Vet. Danny, welcome to the program. Or Major Sjursen, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks for having me, and please call me Danny.
Okay, Danny, thank you so much for joining us. I read your piece, and I'm so sorry to hear that two of the men who were under your command, Mr. Fuller and Mr. Balsley, died as a result of apparently what this general that Donald Trump just blew up, was doing in Iraq, and I get it, and I would think you of all people would be in a position to celebrate his death. Over the last hour, I've been riffing about a fundamental difference between strategy and tactics. That a tactical decision is one that produces a short-term result. It's take that hill kind of thing. Whereas a strategic decision is one that produces probably multiple consequences, and as you consider it, you consider the consequences of those consequences, and then the consequences of those consequences, and how you're going to respond to each one, and how the other guy's going to respond to each one. Things that have already been thought through before tactical decisions are made. And it seems to me that what Donald Trump did by assassinating this guy was essentially made what he thought was a tactical decision, a one-off. He thought he was just going to kill another bad guy and get all kinds of praise like he did when he killed al-Baghdadi. And in fact, what he made was a major strategic decision with no strategy. Am I making sense here?
Well, you're making complete sense. As you said, on paper, given my background, won't expect that I would be cheering Soleimani's death. And of course I'm not. And that's not because I think Soleimani was a great guy, but rather because I agree with you. This was a massive, massive strategic blunder. And from most of the insider reporting I've seen, unsurprising given President Trump's temperament, it appears that very little thought was actually put into this. He was presented, according to a New York Times article, with three scenarios or a few scenarios, and the most extreme option, which is usually a throwaway option, because I've given those briefings to bosses, to commanders, where we provide options and they pick a course of action. Normally, the most extreme, the most aggressive choice is a throwaway. And very rarely does the decision maker choose that, but it appears from at least the insider reporting, and that does not surprise me, that Trump just jumped on this. So I am against the assassination of Soleimani for three reasons. Number one, it is illegal under international and domestic law to assassinate governmental figures. Number two, because of the lack of congressional sanction, and therefore what we have is a act that is tantamount to war with a nation on which Congress, constitutionally mandated, has not declared war. And three, your point, that this is a strategic blunder that is certain to blow back on us, just like every single ill-advised operation since 9/11 has blown back on us. Let me say that again. Every single operation the U.S. military has undertaken since September 12th, 2001 has ended up blowing back on us. So that's my general position, and I will tell you, I have taken a lot of heat for that. I don't really care about the internet trolls, but I do feel hurt when soldiers who served under my command in Iraq or Afghanistan attack my position, call me a terrorist apologist. That's not easy to hear, but I have to stand by my guns because strategy is not a place for emotion.
Yeah, and I will note for our viewers and listeners that Major Danny Sjursen wrote an op-ed titled "Trump's Illegal Impeachable War" that I found over at commondreams.org. I'm not sure where else it might be appearing on the internet. And you're pointing out violence begets violence, revenge engenders cycles of revenge. I'm quoting you. This is exactly why war or acts of war must not be taken lightly. And I would add, must not be taken to try to seize the news cycle away from a story of impeachment that you don't like or things like that. The call for action, essentially, that I've been laying out based on my conclusion that Trump made a strategic decision without any strategy, thinking it was a tactical decision, and that therefore there will be strategic consequences, is that the first of those strategic consequences is going to be what Iran has already said they are going to do, and what the United States government, Mike Pompeo this morning, has already said they fully expect to have happen, which is Iran is going to respond in some fashion, and it is going to lead to the death of some Americans, almost certainly. Whether they attack a base in Iraq, or whether they blow up an embassy someplace, or what, God only knows what they're going to do. And they've already said it's going to be against a military target, or at least with the military. So I doubt that they're going to, it's going to be some sort of an attack on like a Trump property or something. But in any case, my concern is that once that happens, that will be used as justification to expand the conflict with Iran and move us closer and closer into an all-out war with Iran, or possibly even an invasion of Iran. And this time we don't have our allies. This time we're taking on a country of roughly 80 million people that is huge and advanced and sophisticated, and and may have nuclear capability. Certainly has nuclear dirty bomb capability right now, and it's all being done with virtually no thought. And so my thought is that what we need to be doing is making it very clear to people that when this response comes, rather than getting angry with the Iranians for responding to Trump's killing of Soleimani, we should be getting angry with Trump for having started this cycle of violence and retribution. And only if we can seed that ground, only if we can get people thinking in those terms, so that when it happens, the reflexive response isn't, oh my God, they hit us, we need to hit back. But instead, the reflexive response is, we never should have done that in the first place. We got, tragically, what Trump set up for us. Basically blame it on Trump. Am I making any sense here in your mind?
Yeah, you 100% are. What you're calling for is a relatively mature ethical response to the inevitable retaliation of Iran. And I would love to believe that when, not if, when Iran retaliates, that the American people should immediately hit the streets and call for negotiations rather than a counter response. I'm not confident that will happen, unfortunately, given the history of the American war movement since anti-war movement since September 12, 2001. Trump is counting, right? He's counting on two things. One, our apathy in foreign affairs. We don't look for complexity for the most part, Americans. We're so busy living paycheck to paycheck. And the second thing he's counting on, and he might be right, is that just as we're seeing happen in Iran right now, that upon Iran's retaliation against an American target, the United States people will rally around the flag and rally around their president, which historically has been the case. Now, that's a dangerous thing. There's three forms of blowback I'm worried about. I'm a former military man, retired in February, so I still think in threes. Three forms of blowback. The first is simple. That's the blowback that's going to kill some Americans. That always concerns me, especially 19 years into undeclared wars. Number two, the blowback that we're already seeing, which is that we may end up getting pushed out of Iraq because of this, as we see the Iraqi parliament putting pressure on the Iraqi prime minister to remove all troops. And the third form of blowback, and this is the really important one, is the one you're talking about, which is that I fear, as Trita Parsi of the Quincy Institute said on Democracy Now! 2 days ago, that Trump's action may well have been what he called an irreversible escalation, meaning that he has cast the die to such an extent that further escalation is almost inevitable. For example, Trump has said that if Iran retaliates, the Department of Defense has already prepared 52 targets that they will immediately hit in Iran, one for each of the hostages Iran took back in 1979. This is absurdist escalation. This is absurdist foreign policy, and it frightens me to death.
Yeah. My thought on how to avoid that happening is to prepare people to blame the consequences of this on Trump. Can you think of any better strategy? Is there something I'm missing here?
No, I think that's our best hope. It may be our last best hope. If we don't rally the opposition to Trump, and maybe even some of the independents who are on the fence, if such a thing exists in America, tribal America to this day, if we don't start now, if we don't prep the battlefield, as we would say, among the people and say, look, an escalation or a retaliation is coming, and it behooves us to blame that retaliation primarily on the ill-advised, arguably illegal action of our own president, our own administration, because that's what set this in motion.
Right.
And that's our best chance. Now, the question is there enough sophistication? Is there enough paying attention to foreign policy? And is there enough nuance and complexity in the brains of the American people? I count me skeptical.
Yeah, me too. And I would add to that the other piece of the equation, which we saw played out in 2003 in a big way when Bill Maher lost his show, and when numerous people, Phil Donahue lost his show for opposing the war in Iraq. Is to what extent is the media, because ratings go up during wars. Media loves, corporate media in America loves wars. To what extent is the media going to jump on the cheerleading bandwagon, and how can we influence that?
That's even more difficult. I mean, there are structural problems with the media since they are a corporate entertainment machine primarily at this point. Perhaps they've always been, but more than ever today.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed that's been frustrating me about the media is that it's polarized just like the political parties, and they play to their base. And so there is massive disagreement as to whether Trump's action was strategic or not. But what we don't see is any historical context being provided by even the mainstream left-wing media. In other words, the understanding is Soleimani was bad. It's a shame he went, while no one looks back and says maybe America started this whole game with its coup in 1953.